everyone, welcome back to City Speak. This month, we're excited to share another live episode with all of you, which we recorded at NLC's annual City Summit in Atlanta this November. There, Clarence had a chance to sit down with four incredible experts in the public safety space who are thinking about violence intervention efforts and reimagining how the community safety systems in our cities can be more just, fair, and effective. Today, we're excited to share that conversation with you. A big thank you to Erica Atwood, Ann Marks, Ganesha Martin, and Wilford Pinkney for taking the time to join us and for sharing your experiences and perspectives. So let's kick things off. Without further ado, here's Clarence's live panel conversation from City Summit.
We got some passionate people who care about our cities, and I'm honored to have them here today on this panel who want to help city leaders to be able to feel like they're making progress, feel like they gotta stay in the game. And I'm so excited to have you all here this morning. So thank you. Let me start with Ganesha Martin, who is a policing expert and founder of the organization Let's Meet in the Middle. You know, Ganesha has done so much in this space as being a former administrator and leader in the city of Baltimore, and had been working with a lot of cities, towns, and villages throughout America. Welcome, Ganesha. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Clarence. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Ann Marks, who's a consultant and led the implementation of the violence intervention programs in the city of Oakland, California. Welcome, Ann.
Thanks for having me. And
Wilford Pinkney, who is director of the Office of Violence Prevention of the city of St. Louis. And Erica Atwood, who serves as Deputy Managing Director of Focusing on Criminal Justice and Public Safety for the city of Philadelphia. And it's her birthday today. Oh, it's tomorrow.
All weekend. It's all weekend. It's all weekend. All weekend.
It's all weekend. See, when you get my age, it's all year. And I'm so excited to have you all with us today. Let me ask you each. You know, I gave a brief intro, but if you can give me a brief response that talks about what brings you to this work. And I want to be able to frame it in a way that the audience understands your why. So, Erica, why don't you start?
Sure. My why for doing this work is I am, tomorrow will be my 49th birthday. And so if you do the math, you think about it, I came of age during the height of the war on drugs, and I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, which is a small municipality in New Jersey, just over the bridge from Philadelphia. I had the opportunity to be surrounded by a supportive community, and if you look at the statistics of who I am, where I am, my ACEs score, I'm an exception. And I'm in this work because I should not be the exception, I should be the rule. Everyone who has the background like me, who has experienced the trauma, poverty, exposure to violence, should have an opportunity to be successful. I am one of the most powerful people in the 5th largest city in this country, and that should be an opportunity that everyone has that looks like me and has similar experiences to me.
Good. Ganesha.
I had an answer, and then as Erica was talking, I started thinking about so many different things. But the first thing that came to my mind really is because when cities fail, then the people pay the price. And there were moments when I was in City Hall and I would see people not doing their job, taking their job lightly, and my mind would travel to West Baltimore, East Baltimore. I would see that child in the house who needed that person to actually do their job. And, you know, I wasn't thinking about my own trauma until Erica started speaking, but I have been able to take my life experience and it's become my superpower almost. And so that when I show up in rooms, I can translate between the different stakeholders. So somebody who is representing somebody who might have, committed a violent act because they were hungry or somebody in their house was hungry. I can relate to that. I can relate to the lawyer who wants to talk about all the different liabilities. So I've been able to take my experience and you said set the table. I hope we'll get into it today, but that table is very distorted and very unequal, even in this work. And so I have come into it and stayed here so that I can be a constant reminder when you're not doing your job, there are people in neighborhoods that are suffering.
Thank you. Ann?
Well, I stay in this work because I love Oakland, and it's where I'm raising my family. So, this is the number one thing we have to address, right? To allow Oakland to be the great city that it is. How I got into this is my mom worked in a prison, and so I, met folks that went through that system and got to know them and realized that no one should have to go through that system. And so I've made that my life's work to try and figure out a way to solve these issues, right? So that people don't have the life experiences that send them in that direction.
Wilford?
I'm just listening. There's a mixture of all of it, right? I grew up in the projects in the Bronx. So I was raised by a mother and a grandmother as my parents divorced. Sister separated from me, so all the traumas of just being in communities like this. I grew up in the I'm older than Erica, I don't even want to say that. Grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. Think about New York City back then. Heroin everywhere. My grandmother on my father's side lived in Harlem. So I've seen a city that hit rock bottom, the 70s in New York City, thinking about, bankruptcy and all of that. Was fortunate to have a loving family, did all right in school, first person to go to college. And I then joined the police force. And through all of my life's experience, I've seen the worst of New York City, I've seen the best of New York City, but consistently the communities that are challenged, that are at the top of the crime rates, are the same communities with the same people looking the same way. And so when I went back and got my graduate degree, it was for that reason, right? I wanted to get into policy, understand budgets and finance, because why? The question is, why do these communities consistently look the same, even though the faces change? And so that's why I went and got my graduate degree. I wound up leaving policing and doing a whole bunch of stuff. And I like intractable problems. I can't even talk this morning. And I always answer my phone and don't say no to people that I like when they say we need help. I ended up in St. Louis just because doing a fellowship and looking at bail reform. People in communities deserve for their community to have the same benefits, the same infrastructure, the same resources, no matter where they live, no matter what they look like. And so for me, it's about fairness, it's about morality, and it's about compassion.
Wow, so I had in my mind some questions, but just hearing you guys talk, none of you sort of describe what a safe community looks like. Isn't that interesting? It was always what you saw that wasn't right. But if you had to build a safe community, I know, Erica, you've worked in terms of helping to develop roadmaps and ideas around safe communities. Talk about what a safe community, if you had to just close your eyes and imagine what that would look like, using some of your roadmap recommendations too.
Sure. And so the Roadmap to Safer Communities is our comprehensive violence reduction strategy in Philadelphia, and it has 4 key tenets: connected and thriving youth and young adults, stronger and I will say authentic community engagement, better coordinated city services, and then safe and healthy communities. Because to your point, Clarence, is that we always talk about what is wrong, what communities need, how folks need to be helped. We don't talk about what we want to see as an asset. What is the end goal? What is the result? And the communities that we are from, the communities that we serve, they're not broken. And so when you think about what does a safe, healthy, and hopeful, using my brother Anthony Smith's kind of words from Cities United, is it looks like our kids being able to go outside and ride their bikes. It looks like there's the collective efficacy and connectivity in neighborhoods that a lot of us experienced kind of back in the day, and that feeling of rebuilding the village and feeling connected to your neighbors, and everyone having an investment in the well-being of each other and being liberated from trauma, violence, and violence being systemic and gun violence. And when we talk about violence, we have to talk about violence not as the problem, but the deadly symptom. It's a deadly symptom of generational systemic divestment from Black and brown communities across this country. And when we think about how do we reinvest in those communities and center their wants and needs and not take a patriarchal approach to it, then we will have the vision of safe, healthy, and hopeful neighborhoods.
So, Erica, you really talk about building an ecosystem
absolutely.
that's just really comprehensive. It's just not one space. And Ganesha, you work through the city of Baltimore in a lot of areas around this space. What does that ecosystem look like that would help us create that vision or that outcome of what a safe community is?
Yeah, I don't know that I would go here all the time, Clarence, but you always create the space for us to talk about all the things. And so this is just how I'm showing up in the room today. I'm going to go to the ecosystem. I'm going to go to the positive and the utopia that we all deserve as human beings to live in, to feel safe and healthy in our bodies. But the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have really experienced some systemic racism type of things, right? And it's those little micro things that happen just in your daily life, right? Like, we'll talk about those things over drinks, but those things happen, right? And so it just continues to remind me that we often talk about policing like it's over here, as if it doesn't sit in this United States that is very divided. And is going to continue to be through this next presidential election cycle. And so one of the things that I think is so important about this work is to be able to hold two things that just do not mesh, oil and water, right? So sitting in this space that we cannot boil the ocean, that we are talking about systemic racism that has created these divested communities, that's created all the things that this one person that's now a politician is supposed to fix. Let's keep it 100, right? Like, that's what we're asking these people to do, while the systems that still sit around these mayors, these county execs, all these, still divesting, still calling up saying, I need more police over here, and they get them. Why? Because that's who funds the campaigns. And I'm not saying that that's negative per se. I'm saying that's the system that we are in right now. And the way that crime is talked about, the way communities are talked about, as I was thinking about answering some of these questions this morning, we often go with violence interruption work or CVI, all of these things like, here, aren't you happy? Aren't you happy we're helping you? Right? Don't you want a better life? Don't you want to put that gun down? Right? Don't you want this job? Right? And this morning, as I was thinking about it, I was like, no, that is old. We're going back to the same communities that were redlined. We're going back to the same communities that when I walked to Baltimore City and we're walking around the school with the mayor, and I'm like, why is there, why do you say do not drink on the water fountain? Oh, that's because of lead. Let's keep moving. Really? Right? And so let me settle back down into my situation. What was the question? Okay. So when we talk about that those are the realities and we can't stay stuck there, right? What do we do about it, right? And so I feel like there has to be kind of a three-tier system. We've got to deal with the acute issue, right? People are dying. People are being shot in the head on a regular basis, and there are people that are intent on doing those sorts of things. So when you create an ecosystem, you need to talk about what type of violence are you trying to address first, right? Because we start talking about mentorship and after-school programs, and that's right for a certain cohort of people. But if we're talking about people that are shooting and being shot, there are certain services that need to go to those folks. And so when we're talking about an ecosystem, it is, because I'm going to wrap it up because I'm taking up too much time.
you know, the challenge is where you get started sometimes, right? And so it's coming at you every day. You know, you're not just dealing with the public safety issues. I mean, you're dealing with unemployment, you're dealing with housing, mental health. I mean, you go on and on and on as a leader. And I think that the reaction that you have about this issue is probably one that most officials have almost every day. I don't know where to start. And I just think that's real. And I appreciate you being authentic and in this space, because we ain't got time to just play around right now and make ourselves feel good that I'm in these roles and not having much impact around these issues. Wilford, I want to come to you. One of the biggest things that leaders in roles, especially in the political and public service area, face is the rhetoric every day about effectiveness of community violence intervention programs. You know, we want them, but they are not effective. That's the reaction. We want them, but we want them here in this space or in this neighborhood, but we don't want them in the other neighborhood. Talk to us about how you balance doing the work thoughtfully and how you show up with your strategies in the communities to make sure that they work both at the local and I'd say neighborhood, more so than national, because the issues we're dealing with are on the ground.
And I think the answer to this is also the answer to the previous question. And so it's great to be with people who know the work, and so it's easy to answer questions. It starts and ends with people. If we want to talk about safety and what's a safe community is where the people in the community are engaged and dictate what safety looks like. You don't have to respond to every challenge and request. I think oftentimes as leaders, mayors, officers, comms people, especially in this age of Twitter and social media, right? Everything that's put out there, sometimes people feel like they have to respond to, but when you get into that one-on-one engagement, once again, the community is not centered. So the community has to be centered first and always. Even we talk about numbers and everybody's down or up, or hopefully all down, and many cities are down today. This work is about people, not numbers. And you have to consistently center people. You have to engage, you have to gain that trust. And most of the communities we're talking about, the communities don't trust institutions, don't trust mayor's offices, don't trust hospital systems, don't trust social service organizations. So you have to show up in innovative ways, you have to just show up, and you have to show up consistently and often. The cameras show up when someone's shot, when a child is hurt, when an elderly person's hurt. When the cameras go away, people don't see you. And if they don't see you, then you don't build trust, and then you can't build a safe community and help them build a safe community, right? Because we do have to, I'm a language person, and so when we start to think about what is a safe community, well, the community determines that, but we have to be careful because then we start to say, well, a safe community looks this way, right? So when you see a bunch of young black men walking down the street dressed a certain way, that's not a safe community. That community determines what safety is. That community determines the dynamic and what those people collectively determine that this community is all about. And so a safe community is a place where you have access to the same resources as anybody else, an opportunity, but it doesn't have to look the same. And that's a challenge when we start to think about safety. So how do we deal with the rhetoric? We center community, we center people, we go in there and we are consistently engaging and amplifying the voices of the people doing the work, because this is not new. There's no real new solution in a sense, right? People have been ensuring safety in their communities for generations. It just hasn't been everybody, and most of these neighborhoods are transient, so people leave when they lose energy. So we have the ideas to make sure communities are safe in terms of those people who live there. We just often want to come in and tell people what safety is.
Oh man, that is really heavy and real because when you visualize what a safe community and people come in and tell you what initiatives you need to put in place, what they should look like, and they're not from your community most often. You know, they are consultant and other people. All right, we're gonna keep it real here today. But Erica, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, so two things. One, just to kind of double down on what Will said is when we talk about centering communities, we can't just center them as the showpiece, as the turkey, as a centerpiece of the meal. We have to center them in a way where we're truly listening and consulting with them, and to some degree compensating them either through resources or for their expertise when we're going into these communities and asking them what they need and building out that ecosystem with them. A lot of times to some of the violence that the structural violence that we experience in our work that Ganesha was alluding to is that oftentimes you'll have folks come in and lift up these experts that have no connectivity to the neighborhoods in which they are trying to save or help create a safety for. And so there has to be some authenticity. There must be a level of authenticity that exists in how you engage community, and you have to be able to actually listen and then enact what you're being asked for, not as a nice to have, but a need to have to get to the sustainability you want for safe communities.
Real quick, I want to add on to that. So focused deterrence was tried twice in Baltimore. It failed twice. And when I raised the money to do it the third time, there was a lot of pushback. But when I went to the community, like I knew that the way that they did the call-ins were disrespectful.
Yep.
The way that they, threatened people, all those sorts of things. And so instead of us going back in again and say, hey, here we are, we're back, I talked to a grassroots community organization that has a lot of respect on the street. And I said, can you go in and have the conversations with the community about how they want this GVRS to show up for them? And so the community person, she was like, yes, let's do it, Ganesha, let's do it, Ganesha. I said, I got you a grant and everything. Then when we sat down and talked about it, she said, oh, you mean that bleepity bleep, bleep, bleep program? That's what you want me to go talk to people about? I was like, yeah. But the point is, right, is that also, too, everybody is coming into work at different times. You all weren't there when it started, right? Maybe some of your predecessors were or some, whatever. But you also have to recognize when you come into the community to do the authentic engagement, when they side-eye you or don't show up initially, you need to keep going and keep trying and making sure that you are, to Erica's point, bringing in the people that they will listen to, compensating and doing it consistently, but understand that you're coming in representing most of the time entities that have done them and their families wrong in the past.
And
Can I just
Go ahead,
add one thing?
go ahead.
I mean, this is like I said, it's great to have people because you can vibe off of them. Understand that communities are made up of many different ideologies. Even communities that black community, you go to a black community, you think nobody wants police around and all that, or everybody wants police around.
Yes.
And it's all that, right? It's abolitionists, it's people who are really concerned about safety, whether they really want police or not. So you have to make sure you craft solutions and uplift solutions that address everyone in the community if you're truly going to have community safety. You can't just the loudest voice that wants whatever it is. We're going to make sure that strategy is there and everything else we don't care about, right?
And I want to bring you in this conversation because you are a community-based organization consultant and you've worked in this space for a while. Would you talk a bit about what cities need to do in order to bring community-based organizations, I'd say, to the table?
So I think this conversation, we're talking a lot about community engagement, right? And so I think we have to go back to why are we working with community-based organizations? And I think, for a lot of folks who work in the city, so after I worked for the city, I spent the better part of 13 years running a local organization in Oakland that does violence prevention, intervention, and healing work. And so I saw it from both sides. The reason cities tend to bring in CBOs, if we're real, is because it's cheaper, right? You can do the same work for cheaper, okay, right? And we have limited funds, and that's our reality, right? There's not a lot of long-time, large investment in non-law enforcement public safety strategies. And so the way to kind of get the most bang for our buck is to invest in community-based organizations. And so I think one of the perils is to then come to it from the city's perspective with a bit of a poverty mindset. Like, how do we get the most? How do we, lowball this the most so we get the most on the ground? And so then what you end up doing is being a little, what's the saying, penny wise, pound foolish, right? You're actually not investing in these organizations that you need. So I want to be thoughtful about, right? Like, if you're going to bring in community-based organizations, be thoughtful about how we bring them in and funding them to the level they need to. The other reasons, I would say the more significant and important reasons we're bringing in community-based organizations is because they are closer to the ground level, they are closer to the communities they work in, they have an expertise because of that, right? That, when we're in the government, we just don't have. And so we need that expertise. Second thing is they have a flexibility, right? That we don't have to change what they do, to modify, to experiment, to advocate, right? We can't do that within our government, right? To advocate from outside in ways that advance the movement, right? Advance this work because they're trying things and they have that. And then I think the third thing that they are able to do is bring people in. And so I want to go back to this, we've been talking about, without saying the words, credible messengers, right? People that actually resonate in the community. They're able to hire credible messengers who frequently have histories of incarceration, other issues that won't allow them to be easily onboarded into a government program, right? But those are the folks we need. And so, in these communities we work in, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of folks I would call native healers. They're already doing the work. They just don't necessarily have it as a job, right? And so one of the things that these CBOs can do is identify those folks and make what their calling is into actually a paycheck job, right? So they can focus all their energy on helping them.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. They are doing the work. They are helping. And we need to hire. And I think that is a really good strategy as you go back to your communities to think about, again, you can bring people into a community, or you can use the asset that you have within that community to help build a community. Yeah. So we've talked about, the community-based organization. We framed some of the areas that we think need to be developed in this ecosystem to address the challenges leaders have. I talked about at the beginning the fact that, the media and the coverage of what goes on in communities sometimes drive that visual of what a safe community looks like or what a not so safe community look like. Ganesha, talk to us a little bit about, I know you have background around the use of communication and the use of data in public safety.
Yeah.
Any advice to our listeners and I'd say those especially in the room around the use of data and communications?
Yeah, so two things there. One, data helps you know the story that you need to tell, right? If you don't take anything out of this room, and I know it's basic and it's boring, right? But I think my fellow folks on this table, on the panel will agree. The two ways, like in Baltimore, violence is down. And you haven't been able to say that in a very long time. And one of the reasons why violence is down in Baltimore, and speaking to the narrative, nobody was given credit. And just recently this week, some of the hardest critics were like, okay, maybe I'll pay attention, right? But before they did that, they pulled the data themselves, they ran the data themselves, like they wanted to see if Baltimore was lying or not. And so you've got to be able to pull that data. The boring part of it is that you have to have the right people sitting around the table talking about that data. You have to have the CBOs, you have to have the ERICAs, you've got to have the service providers, and you have to do it diligently. There is nothing else that is more important, and I wanted to check myself, so I text the people that are still on the ground in Baltimore. I said, what are the two reasons why you think crime is down? And they said, we have the police in the community, the service providers, everybody at the table, and we consistently meet and we consistently talk about the data, and that is why it's down, and they can tell that story. The second piece of it, though, that's boring and nobody really wants to talk about is you have to have the right data systems right? I heard a mayor say this a couple of months ago. A lot of cities have legacy staff and legacy systems. And those legacy staff want to keep the legacy systems, even though they're not working, right? And so we've got to build systems that just give us the basic data. In Baltimore, we had 230 disparate systems that did not talk to each other. So you've got to be able to get the data systems that gives you the data that you need, but then we also have to build into the future, which is, can we have data systems where we can have police data in there that may be police data, then also HIPAA data, right? So that we're sitting around, we're looking at the same thing, because what works is when you identify the people you want to help. Yeah. And at one point, it's not everybody, right? But there's a group that you are identifying. You are relentlessly following that person. Nobody gives up on this person. Everybody is doing in their lane. The police might have to arrest one time, but the intensive case manager is there, the community navigator is there, and everybody is following along this person with that data, with the narrative. We have some folks, I know some smart people in the room, I see Peregrine, right? They're thinking through how do you take all these different data systems, put it in one place, and then create something to give it to these folks on the dais to actually get the work done. That is something that doesn't happen on a regular basis. We should have 10 vendors to choose from. We have people having to piece stuff together, people using Excel spreadsheets, SharePoint, all this type of stuff. You think we're going to reduce violence and help people in community with those sorts of systems? No, it's not going to happen. And so you can't actually tell your story without the data. Last thing, we have a lot of data points right now that may come from a health department, may come from a police department, fire, EMS, different things like that, child services. We need to create the capacity in community for them to also say what data matters. Mm-hmm. When we talk about what does a safe community look like, they should be able to say, you know what, this is what I would like to see. And then those should be the metrics that we are using to actually then eventually go back and say, you know what, you told us that data, here's our data plan, here is the transparency dashboard that we put out to show you that we're actually tracking, and we are either failing or we are doing good. And it becomes a system that everybody is invested in order to move the needle.
So Erica and Wilford, talk to me about some specific strategies that city leaders can use to communicate what is actually going on in the community or in the city, not just one neighborhood, but in the city at large.
So I just always I go back to, I'm a language person, so data, what does that mean? I think we need to make sure there's consistency and an understanding of that. There's quantitative and qualitative data. Once again, we get caught up in numbers. Yeah. There's a lot of great work happening around the country in terms of storytelling and using videos and people's true life experiences, especially those most impacted. Those are data points. I think we also need to think about organizations, if we're doing, as Ann talked about, if we're contracting and working with community organizations, understanding their capacity to understand data, collect data, and share information, right? Oftentimes funding, you have to think about this in your cities, funding doesn't allow for people or community organizations to hire somebody to handle data, right? And so, I agree with Ann, I've gotten a lot of proposals from organizations, and they always want to know, well, what's the funding that you put out so they can create a budget around it instead of creating budgets around what it actually costs, right? So we need to think about data in that way. In terms of communicating data effectively and the ways you can do it, first and foremost, number one, share some data, right? You got to think about data operationally and public-facing data. Those are also separate, as she was talking about, right? So what we do and collect and review internally, even with partners, to make decisions, strategic decisions about where to deploy resources, how to engage target populations is one thing. But publicly put out something. People want to know what their money is going to. People often want to know what is happening in their community. And if we don't control that narrative, that's why I'm a big person, we're going to put something out. Because otherwise people are saying, oh, that program's trash, or that program's great. And I put out some information around one of our violence interruption programs. You're going to get the questions, oh, is it working or isn't it? My response was, I'm going to share with you what is actually happening. That discussion about whether something's working or not is when we do formal evaluations. But I'm going to work with some partners to give you something so you can see what's going on. You can ask questions, and maybe those questions are valid questions, right? We're always like getting our back up because someone dares ask us something, right? And I think the other way is just be out in community, right? If you want people to really know what's going on from a quote unquote data perspective, every chance you have to be out there early and often. Even for people who may be directors, deputy, I mean, that's not common for them, right? They're strategists.
Right.
People got to see you. If they don't see you and don't develop trust in you, then they'll never believe what you say.
Yeah, and I'm highly visible in my community to the point where people don't actually know what I do. And so it's a plus delta on that one. But I will say, so one, yes, it's sharing the evaluations that exist, but also sharing them and translating them into a way that, like, I'll bring the report, but then I'll have a team put together a PowerPoint that breaks down what the evaluation is saying in a way that community understands. We also do that for our investments, and so we do an investment report every fiscal year around all of the money that the city has spent or invested in reducing gun violence, and I will also say in criminal justice reform, because they go hand in hand. But really, I think we have to think about how we gather community differently. Most of us are used to being in community meetings that look like this. And so there is a group of people in the audience. There's a small group of people up front who hold positions of power. They talk at community for 2 hours during dinner time. All we have is bottles of water and some potato chips. And then we leave them 20 minutes to ask questions about complicated issues that they are experiencing every day. And so how I've changed that is, the room looks like this, but there's no stage. I get up front and I say something for 10, 15 minutes. There is a full hot buffet on the side because it's really hard to yell at me with a chicken wing in your mouth. And then we have facilitated dialogues at every table by my team and my staff, and we take notes and we adjust our strategy based on what we're hearing from impacted communities, because we're going to not the communities that live downtown, that make the most noise, that are the most affluent. We're going to the neighborhoods where we're having communities and we might hear a gunshot down the street while we're talking about public safety. And so that changes, one, how community views you as a leader and what you're willing to invest, because it doesn't matter what culture you come from. If you break bread together, you love me. And so I want to show that the folks that work for me under my leadership, community, we love you. And we're going to continue to work with you, for you, on your behalf, because we're going to listen first, then we're going to consult, then we're going to engage, and then we are empowering. And that is how you have to approach, and that is a clear strategy of how you approach impacted communities. Is you gather with them, you let them do the talking, you feed them, and then you actually incorporate what they say.
Wow.
I think one piece of advice that kind of I hear across this is that the folks that are collecting and analyzing the data generally should not be the people making meaning of the data. Right? It's got to be folks from the community who have actual lived experience helping you understand what the data means, right? And I think too often we say, the people who collected and analyzed the data, well, they must be able to tell us what it means and what we should do from here with it.
Yeah, and to that point is we have to stop talking about data and kind of, Will, you touched on this in what we're reducing, but also what are the assets, what's the qualitative things that are happening as well. And so really thinking about what are we measuring, and not measuring just what are we removing, but what are we gaining.
Man, you guys have put some meat back on that chicken bone. Those are real things. And, when we talk about community-based collaboration and reading about some of the work that you're doing, hospitals as partners in public safety, I wouldn't have ever imagined. So tell me about that work and how that connects.
Well, I think big picture, right? We've been doing violence all wrong. We've been treating it like a criminal justice issue, and it's a health issue, right? And so if we think of violence as what it is, right? a health issue, a disease that we need to treat, that we need to solve, then the health system has to be involved. In terms of hospitals, something that's interesting is that in every culture, in every country, across history, the folks most involved in violence are young men, right? So there are some people that are or were young men here, people that know young men. What funny thing about young men is they don't show up in the health system ever, except for in the emergency department, right? They just don't. They just don't go. You'll meet a young man and say, oh, well, my 20s and 30s, I didn't go to the doctor once, right? But the emergency department is where we're seeing them, particularly in our field with gunshot wounds and other types of injuries, right? We're seeing them as patients, and we're seeing their loved ones and their communities showing up in the hospitals. So it's an intervention moment that we can take advantage of. And so hospital-based violence intervention is one model that uses that as a treatable moment to intervene in someone's life and say this is a way to provide you care and support in your trauma recovery, and also try and prevent this from escalating into something else. But I think there's a number of ways, right, as hospitals being anchor institutions in our communities, that we can really use those resource-rich environments, right, to help people that aren't showing up necessarily in other positive systems.
Wow, and you've actually put some hot sauce on those wings. I think I'm getting hungry here. And I even started this. This work is important. And if you are responsible for putting together a budget or managing or approving a budget, what they say is you fund what you're committed to. Intervention business work is important, and you have to fund these initiatives and programs, not often just going to the nonprofit, but your own commitment to making sure that this work is done long term. Again, I'm inspired by each of you that you are here on a Saturday morning working hard for your residents so that you can go back home ready, renewed to work with your citizens on this issue and this topic. And NLC is committed to this work as well. Y'all have a great day, and thank you for being at City Summit 2023.
Thanks for listening to City Speak with Clarence Anthony. If you like this show, let us know. Share this episode with your friends and make sure to subscribe. We're curious to hear what you think, what you want more of, and how we can improve. If you have feedback or an idea for a guest you'd like Clarence to sit down with, send us your thoughts at cityspeakpodcast@nlc.org. Join us next month for a new episode. Like and subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.